So I think you can say Metroid Prime 4 has had one of the most interesting development cycles for a Nintendo Switch game, period. To briefly tell you about the history of this game, if you're not already familiar, we got the announcement for it back in 2017, then a couple years later got the updated announcement that unfortunately it was not heading in a direction that was up to Nintendo's standards, and they decided to completely reboot Metroid Prime 4. We never got full confirmation if they wiped all of the assets of the original team that was working on the first project, but Nintendo decided to hire in Retro Studios, who did actually create the entire Metroid Prime 1 through 3 trilogy that we know and love today. And since that 2019 announcement, that's the last time we've actually seen Nintendo acknowledge or mention Metroid Prime 4. We even saw this year in February of 2023 the shadow drop release of Metroid Prime Remastered, and I've been quoted saying in my videos numerous times over the years that I did not believe that we would get Metroid Prime 1 Remastered without Nintendo telling us about Metroid Prime 4 in some way, shape, or form, and then saying, thank you Metroid fans, while you're waiting for Metroid Prime 4, here's Metroid Prime 1 Remastered to hold you over, essentially. Well, we now know that Nintendo just decided to say, here, go play Metroid Prime Remastered day one. You can download it on your eShop right now, and there will be physical copies in a couple weeks, and they acted as if Metroid Prime 4 isn't in ongoing development that we know about. And we now have some new interesting information popping up from a couple different sources on Metroid Prime 4. You may have seen videos online discussing that there was a UK-based Nintendo website that was asking users to register their interest in Metroid Prime 4, leading a lot of people to speculate online that, hey, maybe this thing is almost done. Maybe it's coming out this year, in fact. There was numerous insiders and leakers kind of talking in the background, saying that Metroid Prime 4 is done according to what they have heard, and it may even be out this year. In fact, it might be Nintendo's big holiday 2023 game. And while I would love to see that be the case, there is also some interesting job listings that have been popping up lately at Retro Studios themselves. As you can see, this following article posted up over on My Nintendo News that reads as follows: Retro Studios continues its hiring spree for Metroid Prime 4. Nintendo announced back in 2019 that Retro Studios would be handling Metroid Prime 4 as the Austin-based company was rebooting the highly anticipated next 3D Samus Aran adventure. Today, the company has 9 roles unfilled on their Nintendo careers page, with all of them stating at the bottom of the blurb that Retro Studios is currently in the midst of developing Metroid Prime 4 for the Nintendo Switch. There is a possibility that Retro Studios may be working on an additional project, but it seems likely that Nintendo would want to get Metroid Prime 4 out the door as soon as possible, as the project was first announced 6 years ago now. Now, you may hear that and think that, well, Retro is probably working on another game, or maybe these positions are something more in the Q&A side of things when it comes to what kind of work the actual people will be doing on the project, like Metroid Prime 4, and they just need a ton of testers to get this thing out the door and in our hands playable. But if you look at some of the jobs that are actually listed, you see things like VFX artists and technical artists and concept artists. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're still in like the planning phases of this game. They are probably deep into the development of it, and it very well could be towards the wrap up of the project, but this very well could signal that we're not quite as close to Metroid Prime 4 being playable in our hands as many might have thought we were at this point in time. I am also in the camp that in addition to them releasing Metroid Prime 1 Remastered, I hope that those rumors and leaks that the same people who talked about Metroid Prime 1 Remaster before it was released, saying it was slated to get the standalone big boy remaster, but that Prime 2 and 3 would still come out, but likely with more of a limited upgrade in terms of the visuals. Maybe they don't go overhaul everything and create all new textures. Maybe they just get some kind of HD upres and modern widescreen support, in addition to the things like the quality of life improvements that we saw added into Metroid Prime Remastered, like the ability to play however you want on the control side of things. If you grew up with the Wii trilogy and motion controls were your thing for all 3 games, you could play through Metroid Prime 1 Remastered with motion-based controls and the Joy-Cons. That's a great option to have. I did not play it like that, and I actually really enjoyed the modern day enhancement of just dual analogs being supported for a first-person space shooter like Metroid Prime. It fit it perfectly, and that's how I played through it, even though I had nostalgia for the GameCube controller and that particular circular layout, and they still let you go back to that if you choose to, but I definitely felt like the dual stick was the right choice for adventuring through that entire game, which I thoroughly enjoyed start to finish. But I do think that it's only right and fair for Nintendo to bring out the other 2 installments in the trilogy, probably at that same $40 price point, maybe even shadow dropped like we saw happen at the February Direct in the next Direct. Whether that happens over the summertime or whether we have to wait until September to get a mainline Direct, I think that it's more likely that we get the announcement that Metroid Prime 2 Echoes Remastered is the next in the holster, and that gets its own little 3 to 6 month standalone Metroid Prime release. Then we see Metroid Prime 3 Corruption another 3 to 6 months down the road, and we're talking about Metroid Prime 4 really probably being a cross-generation title, if not just exclusively on the Nintendo Switch 2 or whatever the successor to the Nintendo Switch actually is. Because if we're talking about the year 2024, I think that we will indeed know what Nintendo has up their sleeves when it comes to new hardware at that point in time, and it only makes logical sense to have Retro Studios, somebody who can really create a showpiece of what Nintendo hardware is capable of, to put their best foot forward and put a graphically stunning game in front of our eyes. If you look back at the original Metroid Prime on the GameCube that was released in 2002, those graphics, just if up-resed, not even the HD textures that we saw them go over and do for Prime 1 Remastered, if you just up-res them, the game still looks incredible to this day. It was definitely ahead of its time in terms of its overall visual style, and we know that this development team is capable of producing that level of visual fidelity. Why would you not want to make that a showpiece on your new next-gen hardware? And hopefully it releases on the Switch as well for that wider install base. But if you have a version that runs 60 FPS and it has the most crisp textures and it has things potentially like 4K via DLSS and ray tracing built in, although ray tracing might still be a stretch for next-gen Nintendo hardware, regardless, if you have more of the bells and whistles and a better version of the game that looks more visually impressive, and then you still sell it on the base console that we know and love today with over 125 million units sold, so you get a lot of exposure to the larger crowd and install base that is part of the Switch, I think you have a best of both worlds scenario, and you also have a fantastic lead up to the game if you have released Echoes and Corruption ahead of Prime 4's official release, because you've told the entire story up to where Prime 4 will come out. If the game wasn't numbered and it was just called Metroid Prime or the new Metroid Prime, it might be something where it's not taking place in reference to the previous games, but this game is titled Metroid Prime 4. So we need to have the option to relive the story that unfolded prior to the events that take place in Metroid Prime 4 on modern hardware, and I think it makes a lot of sense with how we saw Metroid Prime 1 Remastered critically received with very high praise and great sales out of the gate. We will have to wait and see if we get an additional update around the game sales performance, but regardless, you have enough of an audience there at that $40 price point to drop these individually, and people who want to can pick them up and play through these games in order before we get the big showpiece and hopefully impressive game that I believe Metroid Prime 4 will ultimately be. But I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your personal thoughts and opinions with what's going on with this project. Do you think that this hiring page on Retro Studios is indicative that yes, indeed, they are still in the weeds in development with Metroid Prime 4 and we shouldn't be expecting it anytime until something like 2024? Or do you think that this is likely an additional project that's maybe starting up after Metroid Prime 4 and they are really done with the game and it's ready to go and Nintendo's just sitting on it until the right time? And when do you personally think we will actually see Nintendo acknowledge this with some kind of new gameplay trailer or footage? I could definitely see something like that happening as soon as the September Nintendo Direct, but I would love to hear your thoughts on it. So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.